Wait a minute. So you reach out to a chef on Thumbtack, right? And you want to hire him for his services. All right. Do you expect somebody to drive an hour to your house in Rhode Island from Boston and cook dinner for you under $300 with premium high end ingredients like Atlantic salmon and like miso butter, all put into like prep and everything like that for $300?
No, not even
Tax.
for two people. How many people?
I'm usually charged for two people $250. This person, I gave him a deal at 150, and they they wrote me this shitty message. They texted it to me after I wrote them their estimate.
I'm not quite sure where to start because we can talk about cooking stuff, or we can talk about Satan stuff, or we can talk about how you integrate Satan stuff into cooking.
Yeah,
Because it is your show is a very it's interesting to watch you deconstruct ritual into your cooking show.
really?
Yeah, with the like the Bible on fire, you always cut yourself, yada yada. Like, you've always got those elements in there, but
Okay,
it is very punk rock, low rent, hardcore kind of way of doing it, which I think is interesting.
let's just make some room here. Make sure. Hi, Jack. How are you?
I'm doing okay. You reading your own book?
I'm doing okay. I'm reading my own book. Yeah, it's pretty big. You know, you could knock somebody out with this thing.
Good to know. Not enough publishers consider the melee applications of their publications.
That's why I made it this big, so somebody can knock somebody out with it. That's the whole purpose.
Handy thing to have in a kitchen.
Or Satan Con.
Or
Who knows?
Satan Con.
That's happening in what, a week?
Thereabout. Well, by the time people see this, it will have already happened, I think.
I wonder who's
So
going to
who
get
knows?
spanked with my book.
Bound to happen.
Bound to happen. Somebody's going to get spanked with my book.
So talk to me about your approach to cooking as ritual.
My approach to cooking as a ritual is that I believe that cooking is a ritual. And by incorporating other rituals into cooking, it makes cooking more powerful. You know, they say that there's a time period between when you're going to bed and you're about to fall asleep. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, I think so.
It's right before you it's right when you're like nodding off and you're getting into this translucent state. Well, when you're working and you're working and you're cooking and you're producing that much high volume at a time, you're technically in that same state.
It's like a flow state.
Yes. So the idea of bringing ritual into it makes it more meaningful and more powerful, not only to yourself, but to your creativity.
So do you think it makes the food taste better?
It makes the food taste a lot better. And it gives you more ideas to bounce off of based off of what you've been doing.
What
And
do,
it's kind of
what do you mean by based off of what you've been doing?
based off of the robotic way of mass producing things. If you're going to be working in a kitchen where you're producing hundreds of the same product a night, you're going into autopilot. You're running on fumes. Incorporating something into it like lighting a Bible on fire is a way of kind of enhancing your creativity. It's a way to also cleanse yourself of any past bullshit that you have had during the day. And it's a way to make what you're doing fun. And it's also a way to look at how bullshit things are in the restaurant industry because they're taught a fucked up way of management system. And that's why I like to incorporate burning a Bible in a ritualistic sense into what I do. And we can get into that.
Yes, please.
Okay, so over a period of time, you had people like Bartolomeo Scauci, or you had these chefs who actually happened to be they were enlightened. They were humanists. Ernst Escoffier, the founding father of the modern brigade system, was uh, one of those people. Did you know that he was a humanist?
I did not.
Around his time, he had gotten out of the war, uh, and he was in the French army, and he had learned how to cook at restaurants growing up. But what he saw was people. I'll use my coffee, chugging booze and ripping cigarettes, much what you picture the restaurant industry to be like, which it is kind of, and screaming at people and throwing plates and bouncing them off people's heads and just being completely disrespectful. That way, a management system had been what the restaurant world was considering the normal. And when he came out, he was like, of the army, he was like, look, I'm going to change this from what I learned from a brigade system of how they place soldiers and how soldiers treat what they're doing as a profession versus a job.
Which is how you get a differentiation between back of the house and front of the house staff.
Exactly. So you have it all broken down from everything, from the chef, the executive chef, chef de cuisine, to the sous chefs. Then you have the chef de partiers, which are the people that manage stations. They're the chef of the station. Sushi chef, that person's the most important person of that station, cutting the fish. You have the sauciers. You have the manager of the front, the assistant manager, the bartender, the maitre d'. These systems put into place by a humanist were created so things like screaming at somebody at point blank range, and especially somebody who happens to be
Separate the man with the cleaver from the angry customers.
exactly, or let's say you're screaming at your cook because he doesn't understand what he's doing because he or she or they happen to be neurally diverse, and you go, I'm not giving this person a chance, I'm going to have this person do this, meaning they're just going to prep food and wash dishes because I'm an asshole, I'm an ableist, and that's what I want. See, his way of thinking was every single person holds a purpose in the kitchen and they are treated equal as each other, from women to men to people without pronouns. That's the way of thinking that he was putting into place. And when it came out around this time, his way of thinking, his idea of management system, you had Friedrich Wilson Taylor. He comes out with this book, The Scientific Methods of Management System. Escoffier came out with this management system after he had spent some time in the French army, after he had grown up working in restaurants and he had seen disgusting things on how people were treated and how they were managed. He didn't want to see people be screamed at point blank range. He did not want to see people be treated unequal. He wanted people to be able to expand in their craft and grow no matter what diversity that they had behind them. Around this time, a person named Friedrich Wilson Taylor came out with this book, The Scientific Methods of Management. If you look him up, he's basically a pseudoscience. A pseudoscientist, in many sense, who I believe he had called himself a doctor of something, and he had written this book because he was an engineer. He thought he could write this book on management systems. So immediately, which is interesting, is that like the Malus Macfarium, which was sponsored by the University of Cologne, not really, but it was due to forged documents, which led to the Great Hunt. You have a book that comes out, which is sponsored by universities and colleges who believe that this snake charmer is actually speaking the truth when it comes to things about management systems. And this way of teaching people was a lot different than Escoffier's, a humanist, a person who believed that people should be treated equally based on their diversity in kitchens. And the difference of this management system is that we were coming through a time in the industrial era when this came out in the early 1900s, where we had just had a civil war in the United States a couple decades prior to this, and people of color were freed, and people of color weren't able to find jobs like everybody else. Education was terribly hard for them to find. We were going through still the remnants of the Civil War in many, many ways. So people that were getting jobs in kitchens or in factories at the time to create things like nuts and bolts, which started going on things like the trains and going on things like automobiles, are starting to like come out slowly through time. Them said that if people are illiterate and they can't read and write, there is no way to change them. Pretty much, you must make them tell them to be stuck in their own ways in their own job because they're too stupid to learn. So how do you go from having somebody who's a humanist who believes in this management system to this person who incorporates this toxic way of thinking into management systems, which ends up into the corporate world as we know it of restaurants, which is why over time you've heard things be be brought back to the times of chain smoking cigarettes, sexual assault, plenty of ableism happening in kitchens, every single disgusting, offensive thing, because people refuse to follow a way of professionalism. It even found its way, this book found its way into the universities and teachings all across Europe. So whatever Escoffier, this incredible humanist chef, was trying to teach people, a lot of that got distorted, where you started bringing violence back into kitchens. What you would see when you see somebody like Gordon Ramsay or Marco Pierre White screaming at somebody at point blank range, that isn't what Escoffier wanted. That is what somebody like Friedrich Wilson Taylor wanted, to make people work harder and smarter and faster.
That would kind of like so chronologically, does that would be around the same time as like brutalist architecture, where everything was very, it was the Ford and the Model T and the assembly line being held to the highest standard, and
Yep.
yeah,
Elders of Zion coming out, and like Henry Ford falling in love with that book and that kind of bullshit, and him falling in love with not only that book but the scientific methods of management, where you can be a real man and shut up, keep your head down. There is no room for this.
we will crush the individuality out of you.
Yes, and that's why American kitchens are well known for this level of unprofessionalism that we have. And it's funny because the reason why I say humanist is that over time there have been humanist chefs which have come out, and we can go back to the 15th century, I believe. Was it Bartolomeo Scaucci or Scapi? He was a chef who worked at the Vatican. He didn't work for the Vatican as their chef, but he was a chef that worked in the Vatican, and he wrote for the Vatican. And he decided to write a cookbook. And what does he do in Rome at the time? He releases this cookbook. The Pope at the time that he was, working with or under was also a humanist in many ways. So releases this book. The Pope gets replaced, I believe, during the publication of this book going out, where in Rome at the time it was still segregated, where you had Jewish ghettos, and you had the people who were only taught one thing in the state, that there is one religion, Roman Catholic way of fucking thinking. All right. So the Catholics did not like this. They decided to take this guy and they tortured the ex-pope, I believe, under some kind of bullshit that they were charges that they were trying to assassinate the current pope or something, because they had allowed some kind of enlightenment to happen within Rome, where people were given the opportunity to think for themselves. So that is why I also burn a Bible. It is to remind us that these people that were given something like a cookbook, which opened up ideas to them, and ideas like, having multi deities, and opening up the ideas of things like paganism, and that was wrong. That's why I light a Bible on fire. That's incorporated into the whole ritual of being a cook, because when you're cooking, your brain is just stuck in that one zone. You're stuck in that kind of time frame. It's between falling asleep and not, but you're in adrenaline mode, like a horse with its blinders on. And you don't realize it, but it's during that time that you're being the most creative and you're taking in those ideas. People don't realize that over time that the Catholic religion has controlled things like what what kind of foods and things that recipes can be, approved of. There were chefs that had worked for the Pope during and worked for the Vatican, that had written cookbooks which were sponsored by the Vatican. And it's things like that that we don't really think about. So that's a reason why I incorporate ritual of lighting a Bible on fire when I do my cooking show, when I do live events. And if I can't light my Bible on fire, I'll throw it in a vat of dry ice, like I did at the Satanic Temple during my Devil's Dinners. We're living in a world right now where nobody has any kind of patience to work for somebody under the precedence that they're going to be working for somebody that believes in what goes against the methods of management of Escoffier if you're going to work in restaurants. Nobody has time to work for somebody that's an harasser, an abuser, a sociopath. And I don't know where people find time to be like that anyways. So that's why I set things on fire.
So in your personal, like, every day, when you're deciding what you're gonna make for dinner, what is the process that do you have this planned out for the week? You've gotten all your ingredients in advance, you know you're making this night, or is it more of a let's go see what's fresh at the supermarket kind of situation?
More like, I'm hungry, I have an idea of what I want tonight, but I'm afraid I'm going to cook too much of it. But I know I'm going to cook too much of it. What am I going to make that's going to last me a couple days? I want cacio e pepe tonight. But is that really, I mean, am I really going to cook the whole thing of pasta? Why don't I just cook the whole thing of pasta, anyways, and make a casserole out of it? And that will last me several days. That's how I think right now. Or if I want a steak dinner, I'm going to go buy myself a steak and cook it for, my boy over here and I.
So, what is your etiquette when you go to a restaurant and have other people make food for you? What is your etiquette as a customer? As a chef, how do you act as a customer at a restaurant?
As a chef, I just go into a restaurant and I order food and I hope that it doesn't kill me. I mean, I know I'll go to reputable places.
But what is your demeanor with the wait staff for you? Oh, because I know a lot of people who work in restaurants who are exceptionally polite to the wait staff because they know how tough that job can be sometimes.
I always tip, let's say, I'm a very generous tipper, even though I'm semi broke most of the time. I'll go into a restaurant, even if the server is, not doing such a good job. I'll think about maybe they're just having a hard day. And maybe they're doing this because they're broke and they need to make some money. And it's not their fault that my meal's taken 40 minutes. No, they give me the bill. I'm not going to tip them 20% on a $30 bill. No, I'm going to tip them $10. Yeah. Sometimes I'll throw 40 bucks in there on a $30 bill. Especially if it's later in the evening, it's like 9 o'clock at night, and I'm like waiting for my food, and it's been like, a little bit longer. They've probably been working like open to close the night before and open to close this night, and I'm probably like, oh, who's this guy? This weird looking guy at the bar, ordering nachos. Like, I always feel relatively bad for a lot of these people. It's just, I think it's important to be generous to them and kind. And that's just all I do. Quite frankly, I don't give a fuck what other people think. Even if I know these people are probably blatantly ripping me off, I'll still overtip them. That's just the way I am. Well, you have my book in front of you?
I I have several boxes of your book in front of me.
I mean, I've got a lot of recipes in here. I got pizza recipes. I've got, things like fried burrata in here, meatballs, Pizzagate recipes. I put a whole Pizzagate chapter in there.
A lot of wonderful pictures from things that you did at. Are these all at the Satanic Temple headquarters?
Those are all at the Satanic Temple headquarters. That was during the first Devil's dinner that I had hosted.
Yeah,
That was an
for anyone who gets a copy and sees this, you can kind of place the dating based on what color the wall is in that room.
Do you know how much that dinner cost me?
No.
$3,000.
That's a really good like amount of food for 3 grand though. Like I mean, just looking at how many people were there from the pictures and kind of guesstimating and how much everybody ate and whatnot. Like that's a good amount of cooking.
Yeah, and the first year I gave out quite a bit of tickets because we weren't selling any. We had also kind of announced the event 2 weeks prior, so it was good to get people in. And
Yeah, what is your over like
this past year, we did not give out any tickets at all. There were no plus ones. We sold out both nights. The year before, we had sold out both nights too. Um, it's interesting because headquarters has evolved since 2015. Amazingly, I never thought that it would be at the level that it is today. When we first opened up, like when they first were, opening up, I did not get to see Baphomet for at least 4 months, for 3 months. Sorry, I didn't until January of 2016, and there was a reason for that. I just did not. It was just like you weren't supposed to talk about it being there. Like I knew it was in the shed, but I didn't say anything. It was like you can't talk about it even being here. Nobody is supposed to know. It was that important because nobody knew what was going to happen when they opened the doors. And fortunately, when they opened the doors, it was just one protester outside the fence. And that was it. But based on what had happened a couple years prior with the Black Mass and then the Detroit unveiling, they were expecting something to be a lot more severe. But I think the people in Salem were a lot more inviting to this, especially the business owners were extremely happy. And it's really cool. It's become like a fun destination for people. Nice. That's not like a Proud Boy thing. It's just me going, nice. Like a pizza guy.
Like a pizza box guy, yeah.
Yeah, they ruined that for everybody.
They
Ruined
did.
the pizza box guy.
And yeah, so what was it? We were talking about the Liars Club.
We were talking about the Liars Club. We were talking about con artists and people that are really in this whole thing to make money off of it. That don't have an actual passion for what they're doing. I did not get into Satanism to make money, to think that I was going to become the next mega superstar, like, I don't know, a mega superstar Satanist. I did not. It's just something that I chose. I think, I mean, I can tell you right now, I have been a Satanist longer than a lot of these people that, a lot of these people that I see and meet in TST have been alive. Which makes me feel really fucking old. And it's also really hard to describe that to people with jet black hair, so I went all gray. You can't notice. This is all natural. This is not dyed.
Just decided to let it happen, huh?
Yeah. Being a Satanist in the 90s was a lot different than being a Satanist now.
I'm sure.
Definitely. You just didn't do it unless you wanted something bad to happen to you. Like somebody was gonna fuck with you in a bad way. And I'm not trying to be an old bastard, but that's I think it was harder to be different in the 90s than it is now, or the early 2000s, definitely.
There's a fairly good archive at Lucky Mojo of a bunch of COS email chains and IRC threads and
Yeah,
whatnot. That is really
those were all over the internet back in the.
It's really fascinating.
Well, yeah, that's when like the Black Flame. Yeah, those guys are great from England. Satanic Mojo. They've been around forever. They knew like Parfury and stuff. And, I remember like after Anton died, there was like. I remember when the COS went in the direction that it is today, and it was just completely weird. Like nobody cared. And there were some people that knew better that were like, you know what, this is all bullshit. I'm not going to join it. I don't need a name like this, like the Church of Satan getting behind me, because it's bullshit. I never would have wanted the Church of Satan to get behind me after Anton died. If the man was still alive, that would have been a different story. But, it was bought by somebody who had money that wanted to hold the title because he bought his title from somebody. And that's technically what it is. There is no praise to give there. It's just somebody who has had a ton of fucking money that lived in Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan area. It's just decided to give somebody an offer for a couple $1,000,000, and that person took it, and that person just said, hey, I'm going to call this the Church of Satan. I don't think there's any different than going out and buying a fucking Lamborghini in a house with 5 fucking garages. That's the way I've always looked at it since then. Well, I had fun talking to you tonight. I'll see everybody at SatanCon.
Thank you, Adam.
Hail Satan.